All right, what's up, everybody? It is episode 4 of the More Than Nothing podcast. And first of all, I just want to say that I'm super stoked and grateful for all the feedback that we've gotten so far. People have really liked it. I have a guest with me today, and we talk about More Than Nothing so much that your phone now recognizes MTN, the acronym, as something, it just fills it in for you. So that's awesome. I do have a guest today, and we are going to talk about confidence and where that comes from. And maybe, at least on my side, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think, some myths or some beliefs that people have about confidence that aren't necessarily true. And I have Miss Kim McIntyre here with me today, who is one of the employees with us here at Street Parking. She was actually employee number 1, official employee number 1, someone who I had never met before and reached out because she had heard we were moving to the Portland, Vancouver, Washington area, which is where she lives. She was a member and reached out of the blue and offered to help us. Had a very well-written email.
That's right, my grammar.
Which is why she was hired, because I needed some help with some support emails. And now, basically, Kim runs this office, as far as I'm concerned. She's the organized one. She makes sure everybody's on task and tells us what to do. And because I'm so committed to having real people on this show and not the normal, like, oh, you have hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers, tell people what your life is like, which I think is really weird. I don't know that you're a normal person. Like, what does that mean?
I know.
But you're a real person with a real life and a real family. And so you're my first, besides Julian, you're my first guest on the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And my idea behind having guests on is I like to do these like really ranty quote posts, I call them, on my Instagram, and about various topics. And so I asked Kim to pick one that she felt resonated with her, because then we could talk about it and she could share some stuff that she's experienced that made her really resonate with that post. So the one that she chose, I'm going to read, and then we'll talk a little bit more about, actually, before we read it, let's talk a little bit more about who you are. So give us a little breakdown of what you got going on in your life.
Of life, got it. So I'm 40. This was the joke that Miranda just wanted me to say that I'm 40 publicly. I don't feel...
She's almost 41, guys.
I am almost 41. I don't feel 40, but I feel 40 probably emotionally and like mentally, but not necessarily physically or...
I mean, you're wearing ripped jeans.
I'm wearing the ripped jeans. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm definitely not in a mindset of a 20-year-old. And I'm very grateful for
that.
Thank
Goodness.
Mm-hmm. Sorry if that's offensive to that particular...
Is it offensive to you, Nelson?
Is that offensive, Nelson?
Nelson's in his 20s. He's listening to us.
Well, we'll just call it, you're in a good stage, and then it'll get even better. So I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I have 3 boys, and 2 of them are in their firsts right now. So I have a first-year high schooler and a first-year middle schooler, and then an 8-year-old as well. So all boys.
Yeah,
fun.
They're all super different.
They are. And it's really fun to see their different personalities, their different things that they're interested in, but all of them have aspects of what my husband and I both are passionate about, and so that ability to connect with them and just really try to empower them and teach them and guide them. And it's fun getting to know them as they get older.
And you live near the Portland area?
Yeah, I'm from
Oregon.
Portland, lived here my whole life. Beaverton is where I grew up. Now I live in Newburgh, and I've been there almost as long as I was in Beaverton, which is crazy, and then make the trek up here.
And you've been married for how long?
19 years almost.
That's awesome.
Yeah, actually this month. Yeah,
that's so cool. So I wanted to talk also about this post that you chose, because I've known you for, I guess, like a year and 4 months now, something like that. And you've always come across as super confident to me, but I know we've had like some chats about your history with just like health and fitness type stuff. You've told me like that you used to smoke.
Yeah.
You used to be a smoker.
I mean, that was, I wonder if my parents are listening. I mean, that was middle school for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what was crazy.
I didn't realize you were that young.
Yeah, really young. I wasn't an athlete. I think that's something that, looking at our different backgrounds, like, it is completely different for me. I didn't ever consider myself an athlete. I stopped sports by my freshman year. So that wasn't a part of my life at all. And I actually really despised a lot of like physical fitness just because I felt so incapable.
What was it that made you feel incapable? Were you just like you would get winded, or did you feel uncoordinated? Or?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I could see the people, especially in high school. You know, you can see the people that are the athletes. And then you can see the people that's like, yeah, sure, maybe it's fun. But for me, I'm pretty driven, and so I want to do what I'm good at. And so it was just not what I was good at, so to speak. And so it was like, go the other route, go to like student activities and leadership and my grades and all of that. And I had a job, so I put my time and my effort into that. And then that just continued on, like that drive in other directions. So the physical side of whether it's self-care or fitness or anything like that just was not my thing.
So isn't it so funny too? I feel like high school kids like that around that age, if they're not good at it, they act like they hate it, and they hate the people that do it, and it's like totally a protection thing. They're like, oh, those guys are so dumb, those like football players, and it's maybe because you really want to be out there doing it too, but you're not able to. And I think the same thing with like the athletes sometimes that are like, oh, the smart kids, like, this is so lame, and it's because they might struggle with that stuff. I think we take that into adulthood too, for sure.
Do.
But
thankfully, I've always loved sports, so that's kind of the funny thing. Like, that's where I would say that you and I, like, it crossed paths was I've loved sports. And so, and especially, I mean, you've met her, Karen, you know, she was the athlete at my school, my best friend in high school. So I didn't have, like, a total disdain for it, but there was still something, I would say, deep within me that I loved the aspect of team, but I just found it in other ways. And just go, you do you there, and I'll do me here.
Yeah.
And so that belonging, I think, was probably a big part of it. Like, we could be friends, but it's not where I fit the best.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so the post that she chose, it says confidence over the top of it. Confidence doesn't come from looking a certain way. It comes from overcoming obstacles. It comes from strength, and fitness gives you the opportunity for that every day. So you weren't playing sports in high school or anything like that. Well, first of all, what was it about this post that made you choose that one?
Because of the mental side of it. And I think that we put a lot of emphasis on the confidence in our bodies, and it can be very physical. But what you hit on there was the mental side, so that proving to yourself you're worth it, that goes to the mental strength. That goes to feeding confidence, not based on anything external, as much of it being internal. And I think that, for me, is something that's resonated my entire life. And so that whether it's overcoming obstacles, sure, in a hard workout, or doing something that you didn't think you could do physically, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, that's huge. But the way that that applies to every single situation in life, just like More Than Nothing is in every single situation in life, that's what really drew me to that post and this particular aspect of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's like, it goes like perfectly with what you were saying, because I think at a young age we figure out what we're good at and what we're not good at, and we kind of stay in that zone.
Yep.
And if we stay in that zone like too rigidly or for too long, we might never venture out of that zone, and then our confidence in any other area is going to be really bad. Right. So, I mean, I know tons of people who they've just never been physically active their whole life, and maybe they're 40 years old, 50 years old, or even younger, 30 years old, and they'll say, well, I've never done that. Like, it's just not me, and they never break that mold. So how did you overcome, like, this is who I am and that's not who I am, and kind of start to do some more like fitness related stuff? That's
so interesting, because I think that was a big piece of it for me, and something that I try to talk about, especially with my older boys, because they're getting it. They're seeing this play out in their lives. But the concept of you see what you look for. And when you really think about it, I mean, we joked about it the other day, like when we got a new car, they're like, we see all these cars on the road that's just like ours. And I'm like, they've always been there. Mm-hmm. It's now you're paying attention, now you see it. So you see what you look for. And I think that's true in so many areas. So that I don't see myself as an athlete means I'm already not identifying that way. It means I'm already not giving myself that chance. And so I mean, it took me a while, like 3 babies, you know? I mean, my body changed so much. And so I tried at first after my first one to say, okay, I'm going to get myself back in shape and running. And I've always hated running. Hated it. We got a good Bob jogging stroller. I mean, I would do a couple miles and just feel like I was on top of the world, but also miserable. At the same time, that motivation, that drive wasn't there, and it didn't connect. And so it actually took lifting weights with a friend that was a coach at just a local gym, and it was the body pump class. Do you remember?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, right?
I mean, who doesn't remember the body pump class? If you haven't been to a body pump class, are you even like alive?
If you haven't tempo squats to Rihanna or Pink, I mean, you're not really living. It's kind of like Bring Sally Up before Bring Sally Up.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, and of course I always loved music. And so for me, seeing this connection, and that was during my second pregnancy, that there was something else I could do. I didn't have to go try to fit into, oh, you're not a runner, or a kickboxing class or a spin class or something, because of course it was always classes.
Yes.
And so I went to this class and I was like, wait, I can feel strong. That's different. It's different than the experience that I would get from slogging through trying to run or figure out how to breathe. And just those little tiny differences of what it felt like physically opened the door to look at there's more ways to do fitness than maybe what you traditionally thought of. And so that change for me sparked something, and it sparked that sense of I like feeling strong and I like feeling capable, because it all started with that self-doubt because I didn't identify myself as someone that could.
So when you started going to those classes, did you have those like same old like, oh man, like I'm not gonna fit in, I'm gonna be the worst, like most out of shape person in there, I'm gonna be so embarrassed?
Oh, completely. And you're doing it with a mirror.
Of course.
And so you're watching yourself and you're watching everybody else. And sometimes that's fun, and other times it's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get as far back as possible. So yeah, absolutely. But then you also start to see it's about what you're doing, and those moments that before you walk in, when you're doing the comparison or you're doing the self-doubt or whatever negative self-talk, once you start moving, and for me, it was once I started moving and actually physically doing the movement of lifting, something changed. And so those voices, the self-talk voices got quieter, and whether you want to call it the endorphins or whatever, it brought out like, I like this feeling. It's hard, but I like this feeling.
I think that's so important too, because I do think a lot of times people, when they decide I'm going to exercise, they think that they have to do X, Y, or Z. Whatever it is that's like their friends do, or they've seen, or they've, read in the most recent, whatever, fitness magazine, they think like that's the thing that I have to do, as opposed to there's so many different ways to work out. I mean, even in our program through Street Parking, we offer so many different types of things. So that you can pick and choose and kind of make it work for you, because the whole idea is just to get moving and to make it consistent. And if you hate, it's going to be uncomfortable. And we've talked about that obviously in other episodes. You have to be uncomfortable to make change. But if you absolutely hate it and you don't even walk away from it like, oh, I feel great and that I'm excited to do that again, then you should probably play around with some other ways.
Exactly.
I think it's interesting too, because it's not just you're talking about the physical side and how you didn't feel like you associated with that group, but since we're talking specifically about confidence, kind of from my side and from the group that I've associated with, because I was a high school cheerleader and then have always hung out with the bodybuilders and then like the CrossFit athletes, I've seen a lack of confidence in being able to do anything else. And that group struggles with, I think that people think that this group has the most confidence and they look great and they're so confident. They're confident in that one thing. They might be confident in the way they look, which is also not always true. That you see what you look for, and people see their flaws way faster than they see anything else. But that group, I've seen them have an inability to go on and move on, and they don't feel like they're smart enough to do something else, or they don't feel like they're good enough with people. And something that a couple things that I've been through that have given me confidence, because I've always been pretty physically active. As I was driving over here, I was like, what am I going to share that has helped me with confidence? And one of the things is when I was working on seminar staff, I had to public speak And I was like, I'll work out in front of people all day long. Like, fine, film it, bring a crowd, like whatever. But when I had to get up and start giving lectures for these seminars, I was terrified. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess up. And doing that over and over and over again gave me so much confidence now to just like walk into a random group of people and just be able to talk and things like that. But it goes both ways. And I think people need to realize that it's not just, we're not just talking about, oh, if you need to lose weight or if you need to get in shape, this might be an issue you run into. We all have those issues. And the only way that you're going to move forward is to put yourself in the uncomfortable situation.
Well, I was thinking about it as a cycle because that's what, again, the like prove to yourself that you're worth it. Prove to yourself that you can do hard things, that you can overcome obstacles. That fitness, it's like this cycle where fitness can be the doorway into this growth in your mindset and into your inner voice. Or it can be like the outlet in which you then grow even more. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny you say that like the walking into the room and working out and walking to the room and public speaking, and I'm like, we're totally opposite in that way because I'm like, oh, I gave graduation speech, you know what I mean? Like, I'm totally good, but the moment that it was like, I'm in a room with other people and they're watching me work out, like, what? I can't do this. And so it really was like a growing place for me to see that for my mindset, for my, like, you can pick this up. You can do this. You can push yourself to the point of discomfort. I would translate it into other hard things that I've done, like that were familiar, and then it really helped me break through a barrier and grow even more outside of my comfort zone overall. And to even, I mean, whether it's send you an email, you know, and just go, I don't have anything to lose anymore. And so I think there's times that people can look at something and go, I can't do that, or I'm not fit enough, or I don't have enough of the skill to do that. And it takes the smallest thing. That's why I love the more than nothing concept, mindset, because it's like, I just took 10 minutes for myself, all by myself. And if I can do that, what else can I do that's slightly uncomfortable? And it can just snowball. It can be like gasoline on a fire of confidence, because you realize just these little things. It doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be giving a graduation speech or speaking seminar staff or performing at the games. It doesn't have to be these grand gestures or, you know, displays of confidence. It's just valuing yourself enough to go, I did that and I did it for me and no one else. So no matter what someone else thought, I showed up for myself.
I mean, it could literally be something so small as, if you're not currently doing anything for fitness, as going for a walk in your neighborhood. Like that could be the, like, you're breaking that. And I'm going to go for a walk every day this week for, you know, for a few weeks. I'm going to do that every single day. And then that just breaks and it builds the grooves. I know both you and I have read Atomic Habits.
Yes. Yeah.
And he talks about proving it to yourself, like giving yourself the evidence that you are that person.
Exactly.
Because what he talks about in Atomic Habits is you don't want to reach a goal. You want to become the type of person who has that goal.
Yes.
And you need to give yourself evidence over and over again that you are that person. So every single time you showed up to class, or every single time you worked out, even if you didn't have the greatest workout, even if you felt silly during it, but every time you showed up, it's just another little small piece of evidence that you are a person who works out, because you've done it 5 times now. So
and it doesn't even, at that point, and for me, it wasn't even saying I'm an athlete. I still have my moments like, what? No, not an athlete. Like,
I feel like I still say that.
Right? Like, we can just call it, I like to work out.
Yeah.
And it matters to me because I know what it does for me. And it's not about a performance. It's not about, the value that it has nothing to do with numbers. Whether I'm talking about my weight, or I'm talking about what I can lift, or how much the dumbbells weighed that day, or what my numbers were for the time, how long a workout took me, the value is completely different. And it's just saying, I'm a person that shows up. I'm a person that puts myself in uncomfortable positions because I know that it's worth it, because I'm worth that. And that just, it really has this effect that I think is so much more empowering than people will often give themselves a chance to experience.
And I think, too, there's like there's like a pendulum swing or like a ramp up, I guess I should say more, where again, if you're starting from 0, you don't need to choose something that you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to go sign up for a Spartan race and challenge myself, and I'm going to prove to myself that I can do it. That's a great mindset, but developing consistency first and just, okay, I'm doing it. I'm showing up every day. I'm worth it, like you said. And then I do feel that it is important sometimes, and I feel a lot of times people never quite get to this step of okay, now I'm consistent with it. Now let's see if I can overcome something that's really uncomfortable. Yes. So it might start with a walk around the block where it's like, okay, this isn't so bad. I'm not like super sweaty or breathing too hard or super sore or anything. Once you're consistent with that, it's like, okay, what if you tried jogging a few of those steps? Or what if you tried doing some air squats on the corners every single time, where now it's starting to get uncomfortable? I know that I've learned so much about myself in workouts that are hard, because you're like, I mean, still, I'll be like, why am I doing this? Right. I can't do this. This is too hard. Like, whatever. And you just learn. And then literally you'll have something come up later in the day that's hard. And you're like, well, this morning I almost died on the assault bike. So this is fine. Like, I can do this. Yeah. This is fine.
That was the joke, actually. So that I did that body pump class during my pregnancy. And then with my 3rd pregnancy, I mean, I did it for a few years because and it was only a few times a week at the most. But then I told my husband, when our youngest was like 4 months old, I said, I'm going to go to a boot camp class. And it's at 5:30 in the morning. And he laughed so hard at me. He's like, you are not a morning person. Good. Like, super encouraging. Like, I want you to do that. But that's also really comical that you're going to get up and go at 5:30. And at that point, 3 kids, right? 6-year-old, 3-year-old, new baby. And I was like, look, if something's going to kick my butt, it's going to be me. Because right now, it's the kids. It's this adjusting, and it's the roles and all of the things that moms go through in the shifting of identity or just figuring out life sometimes. And it wasn't even that I was like sick of feeling defeated or anything like that, but something in me said, I'm going to do this because by the time I get home, I will have that reference point that I did something that felt strong and empowering for me no matter what the day holds. And just that, like, I'm going to do this, I won't ever forget, because then it translated. And I truly haven't looked back from I still love the earliest morning workouts. Like, that's still my thing. I don't do it as much, but
I definitely have tried, and this is not something I have overcome completely yet. I've been able to do it for a little bits at a time, but I think it's important too, like talking about from a mom standpoint, because you do like feel it's never ending. There's no ending where you're like, yes, I nailed being a mom. Done. Gosh. Like, no. It's never ending, and it's defeating, because it's like as soon as one thing might feel like you have it under control, I'm sure with 3, like I can't even imagine, another thing feels like it's out of control, and then someone breaks something, and then it's like this never ending, like I can't get ahead, I can't accomplish. You almost feel like you never accomplish anything. Right. Where at least if you hit that workout early in the morning, or you make it happen later in the day, you have, like you said, a point during the day, you're like, I finished this, and it was really hard. Yeah. Like, this is a really hard thing that nobody's making me do, that I chose to do on my own, and I finished it, and it was for me, and it made me better. And I think just being able to check that box every single day mentally is, like, so important.
Absolutely. So Brene Brown, we both love Brene. Yes. And remembering in her, I think it's Daring Greatly, she talks about scarcity and that scarcity epidemic for us as humans. And she said, from the moment we wake up in the morning, we have this sense of not enough. So I didn't get enough sleep. And as your day goes on, you're always aware of these not blank enough. So whether we're talking about mom, right? Like, I didn't do enough for my kids today. Did I do the right things? Like, there's always something. And it's true of people, not just parents, but this sense of lack, or this sense of I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not fit enough, don't have enough money, there's not enough of something. And so the opposite of that, as she talks about, is like the wholeheartedness. And I see that really being the place, coming back to the piece of confidence, that those little actions, they build on each other. Because we fight against that not enough sense so much of our lives. And so if there's one thing that we can do every day that gives us our power back over that voice, that's where I see fitness being such a great outlet for that, and such a great tool that is that accessible, because no one else is forcing you. They cannot make you do it. And so it's this huge proving to yourself that you did do enough, you are capable. It just starts rewriting that story that we can go through in our head.
I think it's really sad that so many people don't see fitness as that. So I kind of want to talk about this too, because this is kind of what, in the post it specifically said that confidence doesn't come from a way that you look. I think that so many people focus their workouts and what they're eating and all of that specifically on a goal to look a certain way. And what you're talking about is never being enough. So the reality of the situation is, and I think I can talk about this from a pretty well-educated, or a place where I understand because I've been around so many extremely fit people, that I don't care how fit you get, there's always going to be someone more in shape than you.
Yes.
And even if there's not, even if you're like the most fit, whatever, Matt Fraser or whoever, give it a few years, that shit's going away.
It's just a
you
season.
You can't keep it forever.
It's just a season.
Yeah, so if your whole entire identity, or your whole entire, I guess, sense of if you're successful at your workouts is based on how you look, there's always going to be somebody better looking than you too. I mean, it's crazy. Like, we all see it. Like, you go on Instagram, you can find thousands of beautiful people all day long. So if your goal, you're never going to feel like you're enough if that's the only measure that you have. And even if you do get to a place where you feel really good about it, if that's your whole identity, or it becomes the only thing that makes you feel confident, eventually that's going to start going away.
Right, it's those externals
that
you have no control over when it really comes down to it.
That's something that I had to learn, obviously, when I was pregnant. I was known for the Miranda, like, abs and fitness, and it was like, okay, who am I now with the pregnancy? And that whole situation changed me completely. It's a lot of where More Than Nothing came from, and it's the reason that I'm able to connect with people so much better now that maybe I couldn't before, because I couldn't understand people's situations, especially mom's situations, as much. But I wanted to ask you the confidence, because I don't want people to read into what you're saying as, oh, I got healthier because you look fantastic. And the other day I convinced you even to work out in your sports bra for an advertisement for our members. But talk about, is that because you are so confident in how you look, or is it more from the inside? And explain that a little bit, because I think it's important.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question, because it's very much the internal. Because going back to you see what you look for, we know this is true of every single person. You are your own worst critic. So you could look in a mirror and find all of your flaws if you're fixated on all of your flaws. And so for me, that body image, it's been, for sure, it can be a roller coaster at times, but I try to hold to that standard of, well, what am I looking for? Because I don't want to be so stuck in a mindset of it being something where my value is given to me from an external circumstance, and go through 3 babies and the body changes and, a C-section, scars and all of that. It's like, this is who I am. And so there has to be a point in which you kind of reconcile. I'm either going to continue to be my own worst critic, no matter how good I might look or what my PRs are, or I'm going to try to find some deeper meaning of value. And so for me, it started there. And we've talked about this a little bit, like, this isn't even the most fit I've ever been. And so for me at times, my issue with comparison, my mom was actually reminding me of this yesterday. She's like, you are so competitive. And I looked at her and she said,
that's true. I will say that I've worked out with Kim enough to know that that's true.
But she was like, but it's with yourself because of what you expect from yourself. And I was like, that's true, because that's like, in those working out, like, I want to be like, I'm giving my very best. I'm doing my very best. And so even in like seasons of body changing and all of that, like, there's moments where I can go, oh, I could compare myself to what I was capable of. And again, you go to these external points of like measurement, right? Like how you put value on things. And again, it comes down to, well, what else can you measure? Can you measure joy in your life? Can you measure how full and rich your life is? Can you measure how much time you spent with your family today? And so what are you willing to trade in order to have a really heavy back squat, or in order to have a really high skill set? Or, you know, and I, like, my husband does triathlons, and he's committed to that training because it brings him joy. And I want that for him. But there's also times where it's like, we can just go, we're not really like training for something.
You're like, okay, the Iron Man isn't going to come calling anytime
right?
soon.
And he really doesn't take it. He does it as that outlet. But I have been around enough people to see that when you put the emphasis on, again, whether it's the appearance or what your body can do externally because you're comparing it to someone else, then you're losing sight of really where your value comes from. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that actually helped me like the most related to body image years ago, and it could sound really silly or minor, but it stuck with me. And it was, so I've always had really thick legs. Like,
I mean, you're also really strong.
Well, thank you. We're just going to go with what this is, though. We're going to say really thick legs. And, you know, super, super self-conscious of that. And years ago, I was like, somebody called it your thigh. And I'm like, it's not your thigh, it's your quad. And
duh.
Right? And so that difference in a word made all the difference of starting the awareness of, do you recognize what your body does? And of course, becoming a mom helps this too, because there's something to that experience. But when you call it a thigh, you know, and back then it was all about like the thigh gap, you know, and just this idea of how small legs can be, and where media hasn't done any favors to that body image. But I'm like, but when you call it a quad, when you're talking about it and you're referring to it as a muscle, muscle is associated with strength. And strength is a totally different way of identifying this is what my legs can do, not what they look like.
You look at the piece of machinery as opposed to like, yeah, that's cool.
And so it's just those little things that, again, it's shifting of a mindset, right? And it's just going, I'm either going to get tired of my own head and like the cycle that it can go on in a negative way, and something can change into more positive, or you can just do little things to help yourself along the way and just not go to those dark places.
That's awesome. I like that. The piece of machine. We're not pieces of meat. All right, we're machines over here, Nelson.
Well, that's the thing is like your thigh is an object. That's what it sounds like. Chicken thighs, right? You're gonna cook up some chicken thighs. Like it's very objectified in that way. And it's like no, it's a source of something else.
Yes. So kind of to wrap it up a little bit, something that I want to talk about is I think when people, because a lot of the people that are listening to this, I think try to use it for some sort of like motivation or whatever. And I think when we hear like, oh, if I looked like this person, I would be more confident. I think if we really dig deeper into it, what you're saying is if I was able to do what this person does, so do what that person does, and if that's the lifestyle that you want, that's what's going to make you more confident. Even if you never end up looking that specific way, or if you never end up, again, there's always going to be, well, okay, now if I got to this point, now if I get to this point, I'll really be happy. Now, and if you keep chasing that, it's the lifestyle and it's the habits. It's, for me, fitness has always been a way that I prove to myself that I just don't quit. It's me. It's who I am. No matter what obstacles have come into my life, no matter what injuries or challenges or whatever, I stick with it. And it's how I've proven that I can do something and I can stick with something forever. And I think that's what gives me confidence. It's overcoming all these things and still being who I want to be through it. More than, the way that you're ever going to end up looking or anything like that. So small little things. When we talk about the More Than Nothing podcast, it's like, okay, well, how do I apply this? Do something today that's the lifestyle of that person that you think in your head that you might be attached to, like a look, but also what does that person do? What does that future version of you do? And take small steps to becoming that person and forget about how eventually it makes you look and think about how you're going to feel because you've overcome all this stuff to get rid of bad habits or whatever.
And the flip side of that is knowing there are people, and we know this in the street parking community, we see the posts. There are people going through really hard things. And so there's on the same side of it, like you use it to fuel your confidence of you're a person that doesn't quit. And I want to go, I'm a person that doesn't not face hard things. Because I know for me, that is something that is really destructive to my overall well-being is avoidance or detaching or not wanting to face what the hard thing is. And so if I can use fitness as like my gateway into remembering that there's a lot of hard things that are going on in life or in the lives of those around me, but I can do this hard thing that has an effect, like a ripple effect of good. I mean, whether it's self-care or it's just clearing the mind a little bit, it's the reminder that even the fitness side of it isn't necessarily going to be the hardest thing that you face every day. But it reminds you, it gives you that inside voice of, I do hard things. I face them. I overcome them. I don't quit. I don't quit on myself. I don't run away from them, and I don't hold back.
And I don't think there's anything else to add to that. That was perfect. Thanks for coming on to the More Than Nothing podcast. First official guest, other than, again, Julian, because he doesn't really count, right? I think this is going to be super helpful for people to hear a perspective from a real person and a real mom and my real friend. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I want to point out that it's your massive podcast.
Yeah, it's huge.
Not your little podcast.
Exactly.